Well, former President Trump handed somewhat of a big win against the Department of Justice nearly a month after the FBI raided his home in Mar-a-Lago. A federal judge this week ruling that a special master will be appointed to review the seized items taken by the FBI during the raid. The special master will now determine if the seized items are subject to claims of attorney-client privilege or executive privilege. There's no word on who will be the special master. But both the DOJ and Trump's legal team sent a list of potential candidates yesterday per the judge's orders. The judge is also ruling that the DOJ must pause their investigation, stating temporarily enjoins the government from reviewing and using the seized materials for investigative purposes pending completion of the special master's review or further court order. Well, Dick Morris joins us now to weigh in, the former advisor to Presidents Clinton and Trump, and of course, the host of Dick Morris Democracy right here on Newsmax. And let's not forget the author right there on the left, the best-selling book, The Return, Trump's Big 2024 Comeback. Dick, you deserve a long intro with all of your accolades and achievements there. So we appreciate you being here.
You would say coming up in 5 hours.
You say that the judge's ruling most likely spells the end of the left's attempt at indicting Trump. Explain that for us.
Well, the judge's ruling says there's going to be a Chinese wall set up here. On the one side will be documents that are relevant to intelligence. And on the other side will be documents relative to an investigation of for a criminal action against Donald Trump. And the special master is going to put documents in each pile. And only the pile that's potentially criminal will be available to Justice Department to use in an indictment. The others can be used by the CIA and others to see if there was any intelligence leak that they need to plug. And I don't believe there'll be any. I think that there'll not be any, and I think that's why Justice is appealing the order, and I think they'll lose the appeal. But I think there's a more important story here that I want to discuss. It's time for Trump's counteroffensive. I do not believe Donald Trump took those documents away from the White House because he was afraid of the FBI scrutinizing them and using them in an indictment of him. I think he took it out because he wanted to scrutinize them, to use it against the FBI in an indictment of them. I think he took those documents because he wanted to learn the details about the spying on his campaign, the phony material in the FISA warrant to spy on his staff, and the collusion between the FBI and the Hillary campaign and the major media to promote the Russia collusion story, knowing that it was a hoax. And I do not think the FBI is seizing those documents to keep them away from an indictment of Trump. I think they seized those documents in self-defense so that Trump couldn't use them against them.
That's a really interesting perspective. Something that I've been discussing with particularly members on the Intel Committee in Congress is why the so-called Gang of Eight, which includes the top congressional leaders in both the House and the Senate, as well as the top-ranking members on the Intel Committee, why they weren't briefed on this as they should have been. And when I spoke to Senator Marco Rubio, he told me that the real point is if this was such a serious and severe intelligence threat, it would have been briefed like many of the others on the committee that he would argue even less sensitive topics are. And I asked him if this would essentially represent that this wasn't somehow a threat to national security, those documents, the fact that the Intel Committee wasn't briefed. And he said, I don't know what the status of them are, but to me, I think it indicates that this is being politicized, particularly the leaks that we've seen by the Justice Department. I mean, what do you make of all of that, given the fact that there's been no transparency when it comes to even lawmakers that should be privy to this kind of information?
I think the last thing the FBI wants is transparency, because it would show their own complicity in the various things that I mentioned. And I think the last thing they want is for people to review these documents in public. And I think that's why they seized them, because they were afraid Trump was going to make them public and reveal their role in these scandals.
And before we go, Dick, we're going to switch gears for a moment. You wanted to touch on something. We're day 199 of Russia's war with Ukraine. Talk to us a little bit about the point that we're at in this conflict.
I think we're at a terribly important point and a moment in world history. I believe the Russian troops are in full retreat. I believe they're breaking and falling apart. John Jordan, who appears on this show and my show frequently, who's a former intelligence analyst and fluent in Russian and spends his life monitoring Russian media, reports that there are 10 to 25,000 Russian troops pinned down on the opposite bank of the Dnieper River with no bridge to cross because the Ukrainians had destroyed the bridge, with Ukrainian forces closing in, and that he anticipates a Stalingrad surrender of tens of thousands of Russian soldiers. And the other element is that in the village of Kupiansk, which is the rail junction nearby, through which they supply most of the Russian troops, has now been seized by Ukraine, cutting off their supplies. And John and I, both of whom were conversant with Russian politics, I worked for Boris Yeltsin as his consultant. And I believe that the leadership in Russia is going to topple Putin. I believe that the Russian people will not permit 25,000 of their sons to be in captivity and used essentially as hostages, nor will they permit their own forces to starve or be knocked out or be used up ammunition. That's why I think Putin is upping the ante in dealing with Eastern Europe, with Europe, hoping he can hurt them enough by cutting off the gas so that they give up before he has to give up. And I think we're looking at an event of world-shaking magnitude. I think it'll be very much like the fall of the Berlin Wall in its impact.
Well, Dick, we appreciate that insight. We are certainly here at Newsmax keeping a close eye on the situation in Ukraine, and we'll continue to cover that story closely. Don't forget, you can hear more of Dick's great commentary. Be sure to catch him every Saturday right here on Newsmax. Dick Moore's Democracy starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern.
Hey guys, it's Rob Carson. September is historically the worst performing month for the stock market, so you better be ready for it. The Fed continues to aggressively raise rates, and JP Morgan is forecasting another mega rate hike September the 21st. Is that why Jamie Dimon said an economic hurricane is coming our way? Well, gold and silver have remained remarkably stable despite the Fed aggressively raising rates today. The Patriot Gold Group has a special incentive for Newsmax viewers. Huge! Now precious metals investors can enjoy the no-fee-for-life gold and silver IRA on qualifying rollovers, or enjoy free, discreet, insured shipping on all direct gold and silver purchases. Here's the number, 800-356-4470. Call 800-356-4470 today.